Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Institute of Child Psychology's YouTube page. And today we're going to be talking about the number one mistake parents of anxious kids make. My name is Tammy Shamoon, and I'm a registered child psychologist and the co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology. So, what is this number one mistake parents make? It is allowing children to avoid hard things. This is a really tricky thing for most parents because we are well-intentioned. We love our kids and we don't want to see them in pain. We feel powerless, which increases our anxiety because we feel empathy. We feel horrible for our kids. And then our kids are tuned into the fact that we're stressed out. So often we'll placate them. We'll say, yeah, you can stay home from school, but just for today. Or we'll end up saying, your child wants you to say, I love you 20 times before they go to bed. So we say it over and over and over. And before you know, nighttime, bedtime routine has taken an hour and a half. We will adjust our behavior to decrease our kids' anxiety, or we will adjust our routines in terms of our family kind of schedules to placate our kids because we just don't want to deal with the meltdown. And we see it. What'll happen is our kids have this stress response. And when we allow them to avoid, their stress goes down, which actually ends up reinforcing that the thing is that scary. We don't mean it to reinforce, but it does. Now, this avoidance, like avoiding hard things is part of our stress response system. It's called the flight response. So there's fight, flight, freeze, and collapse, and fawn, which is a trauma response typically. But the flight means something scary is happening and I need to get out of Dodge. Like this thing is going to bowl me over. It's going to eat me alive. Something bad is about to happen. So actually it makes complete sense why we have this. If an avalanche is coming, we don't want to be covered in snow. We don't want to be covered in rocks. So of course we've adapted this stressful response. But often our kids are scared of things that aren't actually going to hurt them. So the smoke detector is going off when there's burnt toast. There's not a real fire in the house. So our kids don't need to avoid these things typically. Now, it's a little different if we're talking about a trauma response, but I am talking about things like maybe your child going to school or avoiding social situations where they have to, order food in a restaurant or a sleepover for the first time. In order for our kids to do hard things, they need to practice doing hard things. That is so important. And that muscle needs to be built up over time. Because if we keep allowing them to avoid hard things, the message is that scary thing is as dangerous as they thought, and it reinforces that their anxiety is a problem, and then they can't handle it. They're not capable. Okay. They don't have, they feel that if their parent is rescuing them from this, now they're grateful, I'm sure, because they don't have to deal with the anxiety, but it also gives the message that that child isn't very capable, that their parent doesn't believe that they can handle things in the world. And that keeps them frozen in a state of stress. So what are some ways that parents might be, without even realizing it, letting kids avoid? Now, some of the obvious things are, like I mentioned, you keep your child home from school. It might be, your child's uncomfortable in crowded places, so you stay home with them. They get separation anxiety at school, so they're allowed to call you, as many times as they need to throughout the day. They're worried their homework isn't perfect, so you check their homework 25 times instead of just once. Maybe they're scared of the dark, so you end up sleeping in your bed and hurting your back. Now, granted, that's if co-sleeping is not part of your parenting routine. I'm not criticizing. I'm saying it's when these things are increasing the anxiety, but they're also causing the anxiety to run the household. The anxiety is the boss. That is now what is in the driver's seat in terms of your family's schedule, and it's exhausting. So what these are called are accommodations. And this term was originally coined, I believe, by Dr. Eli Leibowitz. And he has something called the SPACE program. And he has a great book called Breaking Free of Childhood Anxiety and OCD. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. And his book and his work, his life's work, is really focused on reducing parental accommodation. So I'm going to highly recommend you either take a training, get some consultation with one of his practitioners who is SPACE trained. And there's a link to his work actually in the YouTube video description. So you can take a look at that, or take a look at his book on breaking free of childhood anxiety and OCD. I also have a course on this that breaks this down for you as well. You can see a link to that in the bottom of the YouTube video description. So, one example of accommodation that might be okay is, your child has some separation anxiety at school. So you allow them maybe one call at lunch. So, because you have a lunch break. So this isn't impeding on your ability to stay focused at work, right? Because you'd have that time off. Maybe your child is scared to go to the bathroom by themselves in a public place. So you go in there for the first time, the whole time. The next time you leave her alone for 30 seconds. The next time you leave her alone a little bit longer. So we're moving towards the goal of her independently using the washroom. So there are small accommodations, but the idea is we're moving away from making the accommodations. So we're building that brave muscle in their brain. Now, the idea of brave, and this is one thing you can tell kids, is brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Brave means you're scared and you do it anyway. So when we're getting our child to move towards something scary, we're telling them that they're building the brave muscle. And we can't build the muscle all at once. We build it in tiny little steps. And that's what we're talking about here. I have a great video called When Kids Are Scared to Do New Things that discusses this concept a little bit more. Maybe it's your child is scared of the dark and they're crawling in your bed. An accommodation that might be helpful is just the first night you fall asleep with them. And then the next night you're in bed with them. And then the next night you're sitting beside their bed till they fall asleep. And then over several nights, you start moving towards the door. And eventually they'll sleep on their own. So you're slowly building up that brave muscle and slowly removing the accommodation over time. But what we don't want our kids to feel is that their anxiety, the thing they're scared of is that dangerous. So that's why we don't want to change everything, because it reinforces them that this thing that their brain is fabricating is that scary actually is. And we want to teach them that the brain is just misfiring and it's just being really cautious. And we have to teach it that that this thing is actually a false alarm. We can say it's burnt toast. It's not a real fire. The second piece to this is we want your anxious child to know that you do believe their anxiety is real and it is overwhelming, but the caveat is they can handle it. So you can say something like, yes, this is so hard. I can see you're so scared, but I know you can get through this. I know you can cope with this, even though I can see how anxious you are. Everyone gets scared sometimes, but you are so strong, kiddo. I think a lot of times when kids have when parents have an anxious kid, they get so scared themselves because they start catastrophizing, like my kid's never going to get to college and they're never going to make friends and they can't handle things. And so we start like blowing off their anxiety by saying things like, no one else is scared right now. Get over it. Or like, it's not a big deal. Why is this such a big deal? So we get frustrated and we minimize what's going on for them. Now, this teaches kids two things. One, to shut down from you, not to share with you anymore. And that's difficult to lead a child when they don't feel connected to you. So you've lost your influence. And two, they learn not to trust their emotions. Now, yes, their anxiety is probably not as warranted. It's so big compared to the situation, right? And we're going to work with them on that. But it doesn't mean they aren't in pain. Okay. And if you're telling your child you shouldn't feel this way, that child's going to stop listening to that internal compass entirely. And maybe they get posed with a situation in the future that is really dangerous. And they've been told their anxiety isn't warranted. They shouldn't feel that way. They're not going to listen to that little gut feeling, that gut voice in their head. Okay, so we want that feeling there. We just have to teach them to differentiate in this situation. Do I let anxiety run the show? Is this thing as dangerous as I think it is? Or is this kind of a false alarm that's going on? So we can do two things here. The first, obviously we'll talk about, I mentioned brave. What does brave mean? We want to build up their confidence through bravery experiments. So we're taking small steps towards either to the thing. So we can do, if they're scared of swimming lessons, we're going to, go to the pool for twice a week. And the first time they just have to go into the change room. And then maybe the next time they just have to put their toe in the water. Again, we're building up through these small steps, we call it a fear hierarchy, towards the thing they're scared of. Or they can simply, but if you can't be consistent with that, what you can do is build up these micro moments every single day where they try something new or something that makes them uncomfortable, to build up and teach the brain that just because something is new or I'm apprehensive or I don't know how it's going to end doesn't mean it's going to hurt me. We need to train the brain that it is being overcautious. It's just trying to protect us though, but it's being overcautious. And the important kind of three pieces of this is autonomy, belonging, and competency. So ensuring first that your child has some say in how this is going to go. So we discuss these little micro bravery experiments. 2, we do it with them. So they are in attachment with us. They are in connection. They don't do these experiments all by themselves. This will help co-regulate their emotions. And 3, competency means in order to practice, you have to do it frequently for the changes to be made in the brain. Okay, so A, B, C, autonomy, belonging, and competence have to be present for these bravery experiments, as I call them. 2, the other thing we can do if you need help removing accommodations as a parent, you're like, yes, like I totally let my kids' anxiety run the show, is again, buy Dr. Eli Leibowitz's book or take or get a consultation with a space instructor. You can also take my childhood anxiety course. There's a link in the bottom. There's another video you can watch as well. It's called What to Do When Your Child is Scared to Try New Things. That also might be helpful to you through this journey.